I'm going to take the first 5 minutes to talk about ATI, what we do, and how we assist in the development of early stage companies. You know, Heather was talking about these rock and roll stars that were on the BIMA here, these CEOs. You know, Dr. T is an icon in Austin, as are Silicon Labs, and now Clear Result is becoming just this great company. And when I say great company, I mean profitable, and they make a huge impact on the economy here and on the economy in the United States, and they're actually going worldwide, and jobs. And that's a lot of what we look at. So yeah, they're rock and roll stars, but they're in my world are the old rock and roll stars. On the stage today are the new rock and roll stars. Heather referred to the entrepreneurial world in Austin. It is just going crazy. The Austin Technology Incubator was created 25 years ago as an incubator as part of the University of Texas. We're one of the oldest and most successful incubators in the country. The model has worked, and we've helped a lot of companies actually with their business plan, their business strategy, raising money to get to the stage where a lot of these companies are today. Over 25 years, this city has exploded. It's exploding now. We've gone through some recessions. We're back. The recession we went through just a little while ago was tough, but it wasn't as tough as many areas of the country, so we're back even sooner. And the entrepreneurial world is exploding. And besides ATI, we have 10 other incubators and accelerators in Austin, the Capital Factory and Tech Ranch and Techstars and Incubation Station and you name it. And it's great. We don't consider these guys competitors. They're actually complementary to what we do. We have a lot of companies that come to us and say, you know, we need to be incubated. We need your help. They don't necessarily fit our model. Great. You fit the Capital Factory model. You fit the Techstars model or what have you. So we definitely work together. A lot of the mentors that we use in our area, in our contact list, are very much the same mentors that are part of Capital Factory and others. So, you know, Austin is a great place to do business. It's a great place to get mentored. It's a great place to have the support, the resources that an entrepreneur can look for and hopefully gain success. Many, many, many other cities look at Austin and want to do what Austin has done in terms of the entrepreneurial world. Accelerators. So accelerators and incubators are popping up all over the country because they see that this is working. The model works. The incubation model doesn't always work because there's nonprofit incubators, there's for-profit incubators, and you have to be sustainable. So like any other business, you have to sustain yourself. And incubators and accelerators actually go out of business as well, as fast as some of the early stage companies. You know, the fact that 9 out of every 10 startup companies goes out of business is not a great effort. But you're looking at 5 companies on the stage here that are definitely past that point. You guys can't make me a liar. You're going to stay in business, right? And have had some huge success, and you're going to hear about that today. We've done this before in many different scenes where these gentlemen and some other folks of companies that we've incubated have come up and talked about their companies, and it's always great to hear not only about the technology, that's a big part of it, but the challenges and the successes that these guys have gone through to get to where they are today. The 2 other things I want to talk about, and that is clean tech. What is clean tech? You know, we talked about the energy world and the clean tech world. You know, at ATI, we define clean energy across the board. We don't focus on energy efficiency. We don't focus on energy generation. It's across the board. In fact, oil and gas is starting to become a big part of the new technologies that we are looking for. Houston is 3 hours away. It's a big part of Texas. Oil and gas is a big part of Texas. Hydrofracturing is a big part of what's going on in the oil and gas world. We can't ignore that. So what I say is we look at any technology that's going to increase the efficiency of energy, make us use less of it, make us and bring down the cost of it, and clean it. So oil and gas, water technologies, energy efficiency, biofuels, anything that's in the transportation area. Those are the technologies that we at the Clean Energy Incubator want to look at and try to help these entrepreneurs be successful. Last thing is to talk about the clean tech community. Now, many of you in the audience and out in the lobby, which they still need to come in, belong to our clean tech community. We have a really, really interesting and big clean tech community here. We are not the high tech community that Austin is. Austin is known, you know, they talked today on the panel, we're known as the live music capital of the world. We don't know really how true that is, but we've claimed it, so we're the live music capital of the world. I've asked Mayor Leffingwell 3 different times in his term to stand at different events that we've done and claim that we are the clean energy capital of the world. And he has done that. And we're not really the clean energy capital of the world either, but if we say it enough, we might be there. But we've got all the assets and the attributes of a city that we can claim we are striving to be the clean energy capital of the world. We've got Austin Energy, which is a very progressive energy company. We've got Pecan Street, which is a project, a DOE project that has been very successful over the last 5 years. The University of Texas that does more energy research than any university in the entire country, $70 million per year. We've got the Energy Institute, headed by Dr. Thomas Edgar and Dr. Michael Weber, which is pulling together a lot of that research, and students and faculty and what have you. We have San Antonio down the road, which is also very focused on solar and of course, fracking with the Eagleford Shale. We've got the oldest clean energy incubator in the country, and we've got an organization, which I'm proud to be the board chair of, called Cleantech. And Cleantech sort of sits in the middle, and all these other spokes to bring this together. And if you're not a member of Cleantech or you haven't gotten one of our newsletters, please go to cleantech.org. You'll see a calendar of events. We do a lot of different events, education events, networking events. It's a good way to understand what's going on in the energy world. So with that, my day job is to work with companies like this to get them up and running. And the companies don't walk in my office and say, I've got an idea, help me. They say, I've got a product, and usually it is a product, and I'll use Ideal Power as an example. Paul and his then CEO, Bill Alexander, walked in to our office. Actually, I went to their house in a garage to see what their prototype was, and said, this is a prototype of a new inverter that we're going to use for the solar industry. And I'll let him tell you the story, but that's how it started. And the relationship starts, and we go back and forth in terms of what they need to present and the strategy, and giving them connections to money and to people and to professional services and to talent, and that's how you build a company, and that's hopefully how you make it successful. So I am going to start with, actually, I wasn't going to go in this order, but something happened yesterday that was pretty thrilling for us as a city and us in this clean energy economy. And there was a big announcement that was made yesterday. Hopefully you saw it in the news. Joseph was actually on many of the news channels last night, that handsome face of his. RideScout, which we've been working with for a couple of years, and Joseph become a very good friend of ours, just got acquired by Cartigo. A huge opportunity for, obviously, Joseph and his team, but a huge and significant thing that happened for the city of Austin. So let's give Joseph a nice round of applause. So Joseph, I'm actually going to turn it over to you, and you can sit, you can stand, whatever you want to do. And really, guys, I want you to talk about your company, how you came up with the idea. I think it's always really interesting to understand where this idea came from. It doesn't come out of the blue, usually. There's something that happened to initiate this idea, the challenges that you've had over the last couple of years to get where you are, the successes that you've had, and where you see you're going to go in the future. Joseph.
Thanks, Mitch. So I'm just going to stay seated. I'm going to boil this down real fast because we want to get more to your questions and Mitch's interaction as moderator. And thank you, by the way, for mentioning yesterday's announcement. So I'll start with the last 24 hours. I'll give you a very brief 3 years how we got into this. Yesterday, Daimler, which is, as you know, they own Mercedes-Benz, they own a lot of other traditional transportation companies of manufacturing type, put one more company in their portfolio of their continued diversification in the transportation and mobility sector. So they own Cartigo, they own Movil. Movil is a aggregator very much like RideScout. It's been in operation in Europe now for about 2 years. They've purchased My Taxi, which is a taxi aggregator. They have efforts in rideshare and carpool. So what was great for RideScout yesterday is that we've joined the Cartigo family as a subsidiary under Movil, under the Daimler umbrella of companies, and it is a big organization, but the best part about it is that they wanted, A, to keep our team, B, I was fortunate enough to be asked to stay on as CEO through the acquisition, which doesn't always happen, but more importantly, they really wanted us to stay in Austin, Texas. And we didn't have to uproot and move to either coast because they recognized what's special about Austin, Texas, about the Texas community, how in many ways it's a contradiction in terms of many different challenges. And so we now are opening up our offices tonight officially to the public. In fact, in between this panel and Bob Schneider later on, if you run out of blue dots or free drink passes, I'm buying beer next door at 6th and Brazos, so you can sneak over there for a little bit and celebrate with us. But it didn't just happen overnight, the success that we achieved and where we are today. It happened for a lot of reasons. The genesis, though, is because of energy. I spent 20 years in the United States Army, 2 trips through this lovely place in the Middle East called Iraq. And on my my first tour got me really fired up about how much of our mission that was there, it's not advertised, but we were guarding Iraqi oil fields, we were guarding Iraqi pipelines, we had soldiers that were out on patrols with Iraqi security forces in the transport of Iraqi oil. It was crystal clear that the world depends on Mideast oil. The United States, though, has done fantastic work in the last couple of years, especially to become more energy dependent on U.S.-owned assets. But we as a planet, and look at the situation in Ukraine, for instance, spend way too much time worrying about access to Middle East oil. I saw that. It was burning at my core, the fact that we as Americans found ourselves in that situation. And then, somewhat unrelated, but yet very related, I was sitting at a bus stop, standing at my bus stop a few years ago. I was working in the Pentagon, watching cars pass me while I was still active duty in the military working in the Pentagon. Cars passed me that had the sticker on it that said Pentagon parking lot. I was just watching them go right by. Other than maybe jumping in the street, getting them to stop, there was no mechanism for the two of us to connect. There were great bus lines that I was waiting for. There was great metro options. I could drive my own car. I could ride with a friend. But at the point when I needed to make a decision, I couldn't put all the transportation assets of Washington, D.C. in one place and choose an option by time or by cost like you would do with Kayak or Expedia buying an airline ticket. I said, well, that doesn't make any sense. You should be able to, at the time it was 2011, you should be able to go to find a site and just say, I'm A and I want to go to B. What are all my options? I found great bus sites, found great taxi apps. I found things like Car2Go and Zipcar, but nobody put them all together. So I went to what is now my co-founder, Craig Cummings, and said, Craig, we're wasting fuel sitting in traffic idling. I found out we waste 1.6 billion gallons of gasoline, not in traffic, sitting still in congestion. And those 1.6 billion gallons of fuel, much of it, directly or indirectly, was guarded at some point in the chain of custody by buddies of mine that were serving in Iraq and Afghanistan, and many of them, too many of them, didn't come home. So I said, we have a real opportunity to make energy and the use of transportation energy more efficient because the numbers are staggering. Right now, in the United States alone, as we sit here, however you got to this theater, you left a mode of transportation that I hope was put right back into the economy. In other words, it was a bus or a taxi that's now being repurposed. Odds are, though, you drove a car that you parked in a garage, and it's not your fault. It's because the system, the ecosystem, isn't efficient enough yet, so much so that 98.6% of all available seats in the United States right now are empty. If you were running a business or a restaurant, and out of your 100 seats, you only had 2 people sitting in your seats every night, and you had 98 empty seats in your restaurant, you'd be closed by Friday. If you were an airline and there were only 2 passengers on your plane, you had 98 empty seats, you would never take off. We don't allow it in entertainment. We don't allow it in the restaurant industry. The business models have made it in aviation, and it's never going to happen. But we as Americans especially have allowed a transportation industry to become so inefficient that only 2% on our best moments are ever occupied in terms of our capacity for seating and moving people. So I said, let's bring it all together. And that's when I met folks like Mitch at Austin Technology Incubator. 2.5, 3 years ago, I was still teaching full-time at the University of Texas, leadership and strategy. I went around to probably half the people in this room. I probably had beers with you, learning how you build a company. And we ended up proving there is a business case. There is the business model incentives in the private sector to apply resources to start getting efficiencies out of that 98% inefficiency. And you only got to increase it by 1 or 2%. And when you're talking about 330 million Americans that are moving somewhere in any given part of the day, that's a lot of potential savings. And luckily for us in our business case, in our business models, we built this company, there were people watching, and now I'll wrap it all up and put a bow on it, which is why on the front page of the Wall Street Journal online yesterday, it was announced that Daimler is moving into this new portion of the transportation economy, and one of their acquisitions was us yesterday. So there is a business model. If you figure it out correctly, we can apply efficiencies that reduce our burden on energy in ways that is inefficient or wasteful, and in some cases just downright unpatriotic, to send men and women over into the Middle East to secure energy for the world that we then underprice all throughout our economy or subsidize in ways that don't rightly impact your wallet or show what we call the truly or fully burdened cost of energy. And if we can just all in this room agree that if we just align the efficiencies in a way that we provide incentives and then markets to be able to match it, it's a beautiful day. People will gladly pay for what they're using and use only what they need if we can get the systems aligned. And so hopefully RideScout's going to be a part of that future moving forward. I'm thrilled that we're able to open up our offices tonight in Austin, Texas, right here at 6th and Brazos, which, by the way, for those of you that live in Austin, 6th Street is, you know, the source of $1.6 billion in revenue every year for our city and our community and entertainment. And yet, as a community, we turn a blind eye towards all the DUIs that are either caught or go uncaught every night coming down from this part of the city because, again, we don't have incentives aligned right. And then, secondly, we're on the corner of Brazos, which is trying to reconstitute this digital economy, these high-tech companies downtown, because this is where a lot of people want to live, but in too many of our urban centers, we don't have the mix of commercial, residential, and recreation done correctly, and Austin's doing a great job of that. So we're literally sitting at the intersection of two big problems of bringing companies downtown to overcome traffic and congestion, and we're trying to attack this DUI problem that kills 11,000 Americans every year. So we're just thrilled to be here. Thanks,
Good story.
Mitch. Appreciate it.
Nice hand for Joseph. And I should mention one other thing about Joseph. Besides meeting Joseph and you know, getting involved with RideScout, Joseph also brought to our attention the energy challenge that we as Americans have in our military. So I'm not going to say a whole lot about this today. You'll hear about this more, but I will say that there's an event that we did last year. It's called the Defense Energy Summit. It happened last November. It's going to happen again this November, November 11, 12, and 13 at the AT&T Center. It is all about the challenges that we face as a country in terms of the energy that we have to use, and in some cases not use, and the security that's involved or lack thereof, the cost of energy to our military. There's a huge amount of focus on this in the DoD and the DOE, and we're getting ready to really focus on it. And so that's an event you don't want to miss. George was introduced to me by my friend Angelos Angelou, who runs an international incubator here in Austin, and he started with the Greeks because they know how to do business. And have you gone outside the Greek platform yet? Okay, because I know they've been very successful. I've met a number of the companies that Angelos has brought in. All of them actually very, very good companies. George happens to be in the energy space, so that's how we met. He's doing some great things. Tell us your story, George. Dr. George, actually.
Thank you, Mitch. It's a great honor to be here with you.
Put that microphone up a little bit.
Better now?
There you go.
Okay. So, first of all, let me tell you the story how we came up with this idea. I think it will tell everything. About 2 years ago, I realized what is energy poverty. I was watching actually the TV news with my father, and we saw families in our age living in the dark, actually with candles, because they couldn't afford to pay for their energy needs. Then we saw children during the night to go and study below street lights because their house didn't have electricity. There was grid network there, but they couldn't afford to pay for their energy needs. Then I realized that some of my friends, they didn't switch on their air conditioning during hot summer days because they didn't have to pay for the energy. So this is energy poverty. there are already a lot of solutions and actually initiatives to face this problem, like weatherization programs, community assistance programs, energy education to be more energy efficient and not spend a lot of energy. But none of this is scalable, and none of this can provide a responsive solution to the unpredictable behavior of energy poverty, because it depends on environmental conditions, on natural disasters. So we said we need to provide a scalable solution and a more efficient solution to face the problem globally and be more responsive. What is the best solution on that? Internet. Then I said we need to create a cloud platform that will allow people to send energy over the internet. And we will allow this to happen in order to allow these people to take part in our goal and our vision, which is to face energy poverty. And then we came up with the idea of Gridmates. So Gridmates is the first energy cloud platform that eliminates energy poverty. And we do that by joining forces in an ecosystem of utilities, non-profit organizations, corporations, and utility customers. It's a peer-to-peer energy sharing platform that allows people to connect with friends and family members, people and organizations in need, and share units of electricity with just 3 clicks. But the magic part of Gridmates is that it brings an ecosystem of players, national or international, utilities have the main role, non-profit organizations, corporations, and utility customers. In this ecosystem, we join forces, and we want to face, once and for all, energy poverty. Today, it's a great day because we want to announce also our pilot, which is the Community First Village, developed by Mobile Loaves and Fishes, and I want to personally thank Alan Graham. Community First Village is a great initiative here in Austin. Great things are happening because it is a village that will host 200 families in need. And Gridmates has one specific mission: to crowdsource energy units and provide electricity to these 200 families that are going to be living in Community First Village. I'm also very happy to have, I want to tell that within the management team, we have Andre Carvalho, who is an excellent person and a leader in the Power Grid Networks, Angelos Angelou, who is an excellent businessman in the city of Austin, and also Gridmates is part of the International Accelerator, Kostas Jaras, who is our CTO, and we are very excited to start in Austin. Gridmates is a headquarters in Austin, Texas, and we are very excited to be here and actually create the first crowdsourced energy village in the world. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that is very exciting. And where are you in terms of financing your company? Are you raising money at this point?
Yeah, actually, things are happening quite fast. We are in seed funding, but we have raised some funds and also committed some other funds. Now we are in full throttle for our pilot to help the Community First Village. So we are going to gain valuable knowledge from our pilot, and we are really looking forward to it.
Great. We'll have some more questions later on.
Yeah.
Next in line is a gentleman by the name of Lou Yan. I always say Jan, but it is Yan. He and his father, MJ, who is quite the character, moved down here from Dublin, Ohio a few years ago to bring their company to Austin, Texas. And it's been a big pleasure to work with Lou and MJ. MJ's got a background in the automobile industry. Again, I'll let Lou tell you the story, but they're redefining what a diesel engine looks like and the efficiency in that diesel engine, and talk about applications in the military. It's pretty incredible. So Lou, your story.
Thanks, Mitch. Is this okay? Again, my name is Lou. My father and I started this company called Yan Engines. Companies are tough to name, but we're bringing to market this technology that we call the differential stroke cycle, or D-cycle engine. My father actually invented the technology, and that story, MJ has the background of any good self-respecting mad scientist. He started off with a PhD in Princeton, worked on the Space Shuttle Columbia, the nuclear industry back in the 70s, aircraft engines at GE, and finally about a decade at Daimler Chrysler in their R&D department. But MJ, the way he thought about this engine was he was jogging in the park one day, thinking about how the human body works. You have lungs that breathe in and out, and legs that make you go forward. So two different systems doing these two different functions. And so this is the engine of the human body, right? Now, he thought that the engine of the car works essentially different because it has one system, which is the piston within the cylinder that does both of these functions. The breathing is what we call intake and exhaust, and the running is what we call compression, and the spark, which causes an explosion, which is called power. So he thought that, would it make any more sense, would it be any more efficient or effective if you just split these systems into two things like we do in the human body? So that's how the idea of the D-cycle engine was born. And the heart of that D-cycle engine is a split piston. The piston splits top to bottom. The top half does the breathing, the intake and exhaust, and the bottom half does the running, the compression and combustion. We first did some development in some small Honda engines, and we dynamometer tested those, and we got some pretty astonishing results. We got 80% better miles per gallon on the duty cycle of that engine. So what we observed in testing was what we thought was true. We actually had fundamentally changed the way the engine utilized gasoline and produced power. But the key to this is that it was a retrofit. Again, I said a Honda engine. We changed 5 components or subsystems in that engine. So from the outside of the engine, nothing was observable to be changed, and downstream from the engine, so the vehicle, nothing needs to be changed. So you can imagine the massive industrial system that builds, manufactures, maintains, services engines like we do today in every car and every truck, and changing that industry altogether, as people are trying to do with electric vehicles or hybrid electric, is a massive and decades-long undertaking. But making improvements upon the way that engine utilizes energy is possibly more feasible. When a car burns fuel, between 60 and 80% right off the bat is lost in the engine itself. So people are talking about aerodynamics and road friction and different ways like that to improve the vehicle like that, but 68% is lost right out of the engine. And so we're trying to attack that major sink of energy. Our first client was, or has been, the U.S. Department of Defense. As Joseph spoke about, they are gas guzzlers. The truck that we're working on is called the Medium Tactical Vehicle. The military owns 33,000 of these, so it's the second largest fleet behind the Humvee. And the Humvee, is, as some of you might know, is being sort of phased out, but they're trying to make improvements on this vehicle, the MTVR. The MTVR gets a little bit less than 4 miles per gallon, and they're a major convoy vehicle, troop supply vehicle that run all across the desert in Afghanistan and Iraq. Joseph spoke about the human side of the cost of transporting fuel. The Pentagon put out a study that said that they spent in expeditionary operation, they spent $400 a gallon of gasoline in Afghanistan. So those of us that pay American taxes, $400 a gallon times 33,000 of these trucks times 4 miles per gallon, and your head will start to spin. So we've been working on this program with the U.S. Marine Corps through the Navy to retrofit their Caterpillar engines. So these are massive 12-liter diesel engines, and we've been working on retrofitting them with our parts. The engine is up and running. We're testing it. We're tuning it. We're going to go towards certified testing in Q4 of this year. So hopefully, once we get information approval from the military, we'll be able to share some of those results. Some of our other successes, we're successful in raising a funding round at the end of last year. So we're starting to look at commercial markets. Obviously, the military is the hugest fleet of vehicles in the world, but we're starting to look at some commercial markets as well. So that's where we're headed moving forward. We're filing a lot of intellectual property and we think the future is bright for us. So, thanks.
Great story, really good story. I think it was about 2 years ago, as we were discussing this focus on energy in the military, we brought a number of, through Joseph actually, folks down from Washington. Sharon Burke was one of them. Sharon at the time was the head of all operational energy for the DoD. And we actually had, I think you were there as well, and a few others, and we presented Sharon with, just like this, we went through a series of presentations to her of military-oriented new technologies that could help the military. And when Lou presented, and this was early on, I mean, he's got a much better story today than he had even 3 years ago. Sharon's eyes lit up because she knows how many of those engines she has out in the field and the amount of money that she could save. You know, the military used to be, the DoD didn't really care that much about how much they spent. It was sort of an empty budget that never ended. Today, there's a lot of focus on, through sequestration and other programs, they can't, and that's good for us taxpayers. We don't have the money to be able to spend all that money. So we do have to look at conservation and other areas, and new technology is a big part of that. So very, very high on what Lou and MJ have been doing, so thank you. Next company is a company called Omni Water. Kirk Patterson is the CFO. Warren Sumner is the CEO. I met Warren, again, probably about 3 years ago, actually going through the emerging technology funding process, which, if you know anything about that, is not any fun, but it is money that the state of Texas invests in early stage technologies. And when I met Warren and found out what he and his organization was doing, and actually Warren wasn't the CEO at the time, I was very interested in getting involved with them because the hydrofracturing market, and that's just one application of what they do, and Kirk will tell us about that, is obviously a huge market, huge challenges, somewhat controversial, and this actually helps that. So, Kirk?
Thank you, Mitch. Omni started in 2009, and the original sort of focus for Omni was really targeted around cleaning water, water treatment systems for disaster recovery. The founder really had kind of gotten this idea through Hurricane Katrina, and that was, like I say, the original sort of focus of the company. But in 2010, that focus shifted a bit to the hydrofracturing world. And Omni started developing water treatment systems for use in hydrofracking. The technology is really one where it's a very modular-based system to the extent that we have customers that some want the water cleaned only to the level where you take out bacteria. So it's sort of very basic cleaning. Some customers want the water cleaned all the way to the point where you could drink it. It meets freshwater standards. So we have developed sort of a modular platform where we can go, and it's pretty customized for customer, that you can go in and sort of layer in the number of modules and the type of modules that that customer needs to reach the level of water treatment that they're looking for. Really, the drivers of this, the demand for this, come in three key areas. The first is just the economic driver from the oil and gas E&P company standpoint. Right now, what happens is they'll use anywhere from 1 million to 5 million gallons of water to frack a well. Well, that water, a lot of that water comes back up, and what they do today is store that in either tanks or holding ponds or someplace on site, have it trucked away, pay to have it cleaned. Sometimes it gets re-injected into a saltwater disposal well, and then they have to buy other fresh water for the next frack job. Well, our unit, again, is a mobile unit. It's modular. It sits on site. We'll clean the water on site, and again, economically, it helps the E&P company because now they no longer have to pay to have the water hauled away and disposed of. The second really demand driver is around the scarcity of water. If you sort of look at where a lot of this hydrofracturing goes on, it's in areas that don't have a lot of water supply. So to reuse water, you know, is really important in those areas. And again, until you get into recycling water, what they're doing right now is just buying more fresh water. They'll drill freshwater wells, or they'll just buy and truck in more fresh water. So again, that's the second large driver of demand, is we sit right there on site. and can recycle the water right there for them, which reduces the demand on other fresh water in areas that largely don't have it. The third real key driver of demand is just environmental. Right now, again, a lot of this flow back and produced water that comes back up during a frac job gets re-injected back into the ground. And so there's just going to be environmental issues that everybody's going to worry about and everybody's going to focus on. And again, we can clean that water such that if the water gets re-injected, it's clean water, and we can take it all the way to clean freshwater standards. From a really overall successes or challenges standpoint, let's talk about that first. Really, one of the key challenges is this market's pretty new. There's a very small percentage of the water that gets recycled today. So the customers really don't know yet sort of what clean means and what they need for the next frac job. So again, we have certain customers that only want bacteria out. We want some customers that want a couple levels cleaner, and customers that want it all the way to meet freshwater standards. And that changes by week, seemingly, by customer, by geography. So one of the key challenges is it's a new enough market that the customers don't really know yet what they need and what works best in a particular frac job. Along with that, one of our key challenges has just been the locations of these. They're in remote locations, and so operating these mobile water treatment systems has been a bit of a challenge because most of the drilling doesn't take place in the nicest places around. But thirdly, one is it's a pretty capital-intensive business. So, our customers, for the most part, are pretty large E&P companies, and Omni's relatively young, relatively small, and so we need to be able to demonstrate the flexibility to them that we can scale both from a capital standpoint and resource standpoint in order to meet the growing recycling demands that these companies are going to have. We have 4 units in the field. We've got some pretty nice big-name customers. For example, one of our units has been on-site with Marathon. It's been on site for about 18 months, operating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and we've treated over 30 million barrels or 30 million gallons of water through that system. We've got other customers we've had so far include ConocoPhillips and Pioneer and Anadarko, EOG. So we've got a pretty strong customer list going, and again, it's a market that for all those demand drivers that I talked about earlier, he's got just a ton of growth potential all over the world.
So Omni is yet another great story, and I love to tell the story. I don't know if Clark Jernigan is in the audience, but Clark is a partner with Austin Ventures, and Austin Ventures, as was mentioned, I think in the earlier panel, is really one of the capital drivers of Austin and has been a great partner with a lot of different companies here. But Austin Ventures, as many venture capital companies, focus in on certain markets. They've been a big part of the IT market here. They've done a bunch of different roll-ups like HomeAway, but not much in the energy industry. And so when we started working with Omni and they needed to raise a Series A, I actually talked to Clark for the first time not for the first time, actually there are many times, but for the first time they were interested in an early stage company. And the reason why is because and he's told me this, and I could conjecture it anyway, it's a huge market. That's what venture capital companies need. It's a huge problem, and there's a really good answer. And of course, there's a great team behind the technology. So the fact that Austin Ventures put $8 million into a Series A, they've come back into a Series B, it was just a great validity that I know Warren and his team needed. And of course, it's helped us as well in terms of our relationship with Austin Ventures. Because if you do have a winner, they don't have a winner yet, but it's getting there, then obviously a company like Austin Ventures would potentially put more money into energy deals. And Austin is not short of deal flow. We've got lots of entrepreneurs, as I said, and lots of opportunities to invest in companies. We've got lots of entrepreneurs. There's never enough money. So whether it's angels, angel groups, venture capital, grants, you name it, it's never enough. And I guarantee you, if you're out in Silicon Valley, they say there's not enough money out there as well. There's never enough money for all the different companies that need money to start businesses. And so the fact that AV came into this was a big deal, and it's been good for our relationship in Omni Water as well. Lastly, but definitely not least, is Paul Bundschuh, president of Ideal Power. As I said, I met Paul actually, I think it was the first day that I took the job as the director of the Clean Energy Incubator. A gentleman by the name of Steve Smaha, I'm not sure if Steve's here, introduced me to these gentlemen. We went over to their garage. It was a true garage startup, and they had something that was called an inverter. I wasn't even sure what an inverter was at the time. And the solar market was taking off. So it sounded like a good opportunity for them and one for us, and our relationship started. And Paul and his team had one of the few IPOs successful IPOs last November, which was obviously a huge thing for Ideal Power, but a huge thing for Austin and the ecosystem here as well, especially an energy company. And if you have not bought the stock, you should. He won't say this, but I will, because it's a heck of a good buy, and it's a heck of a good company. So with that.
Thank you, Mitch. And thank you for yours and the rest of the ATI team's help over the year. As Mitch said, we first got introduced into a garage of one of our founders, and that was back, I believe it was in the summer of 2009. We joined the ATI portfolio of companies at the time, and Mitch and the rest of the team helped guide the company, helped build the business strategy. We have a disruptive power converter technology, and what that means is this is an electronic product that converts one form of electricity to another, typically, say, DC energy that comes from solar panels to AC energy that needs to run on the power grid, or back and forth, or various permutations of those sorts of things. And our founder and CTO, Bill Alexander, has developed and patented a completely new theory of operation for these power converters. We currently have over 20 granted patents and several times that many pending patents around the world. So we've come up with a way of doing this in a completely unique way, which is much more software-based and a lot less hardware-based than any other approaches. So it's more flexible, it's lighter, it's cheaper, has a lot of other benefits as well. One of the things that Mitch and his team was really helpful with, as well as the city of Austin is guiding us through the Texas ETF process. We received a pre-seed grant for $1 million, and we are very pleased that we have paid back the state in full times 3 or 4x. So they made money off of us, and one of the few that I think is a big win for them. And we should celebrate those because they need to continue to reinvest that money in the ecosystem. I led the company through a successful IPO last November. We raised $17.25 million. We're a NASDAQ-listed company. Most people thought our technology was impossible. It would never work. We proved them wrong. Most people thought we couldn't go directly into the public capital markets in a venture fashion. We proved them wrong. Most people thought we could not take on many of the biggest companies in the world like ABB and GE and be successful, and we're doing that as well. In terms of our market strategy, what we're really doing is we're focusing on, and the power converter market is roughly a $50 billion market annually. There's lots of market segments. It's a highly fragmented market, and what we're targeting is some very high growth, high value propositions space. And what we're focusing initially is in power converters for grid storage, basically large format batteries. And in addition, we've been very clever in terms of understanding where those markets, how that market will segment, and been focusing initially on using batteries in commercial buildings to reduce peak demand charges, focusing mostly initially on California and New York. Those are the most economic states, but as the cost comes down, we think this is going to be used across the country and across the world. And we're the leaders in providing the power converter solutions in that market today, and that we're definitely seeing exponential growth opportunity there. As we scale, we're going to move into other markets. We announced a product earlier this summer that won the top energy storage award in the world in Intersolar Germany. We're going to be making some announcements shortly, and the initial applications for that product, going back to our discussions about military operations in places like Iraq and Afghanistan, are going to be in mobile hybrid power systems, where you can take a diesel generator, which is the other big consumer of diesel in these remote areas, to run forward operating bases and reduce those fuel consumption by something in the range of 70 to 90%. by integrating batteries and PV with the diesel generator. But it's not a military-specific product. We see that there are 1 billion people on the planet that depend on these diesel generators all over the world. And again, we're going to be able to take those fuel consumptions down by similar numbers. So it's a pretty big global impact that we're expecting to make in these areas. And there's lots of other markets still to come.
Yeah, it's a great story. Thank you. Thank you very much. So we've got a little time for questions. So if you guys could come down here, I do want to say that we've had 2 very large successes, an IPO and an acquisition. That's normally, startup companies talk about exit strategies, and many companies at a certain point want to either be acquired, because that's a liquidation event for their investors, or go public. That's not always the case. I mean, you can actually run a company and bring in revenue and become the next General Electric. That is an option as well. But in our world, that's usually what happens. We've had 2. I know we're going to have another 3 big-time exits at some point in time with the companies that we've got here. So any questions from the audience?
So, Paul, I guess this question was directed mostly towards you. I was curious, was Ideal Power, are you competing for the Google Inverter Challenge, the reduction in size and impact of inverters that Google just recently released?
I'll give you my opinion on the challenge. My opinion is they're not chasing the right problem. So to me, the cost of solar energy is dropping very dramatically. The problem is no longer the cost of solar, but how do you integrate it with storage?
So what is the actual challenge? It's to...
Oh, it's Google's offered $1 billion to the company that can reduce or create the inverter that will help bring down costs, but it's also a size reduction, efficiency improvements.
It's $1 million prize. There's already been several $100 million spent by the industry to charge that goal. So I don't think that's a disruptive opportunity, we'll say.
Interesting. Interesting.
I've got a question about Gridmates and how that really works. Just from someone who's worked for a retail electric provider, just trying to understand the actual fundamentals of sharing electricity with somewhere like a market like Texas, where you've got all these different easy IDs and the potential for different actual electricity providers as well.
First of all, you need to understand that Gridmates is a Smart Grid 3 service provider to utilities. Like there are companies that provide Smart Grid services, smart metering, energy analytics. We are a Smart Grid 3 service provider to utilities. So we enable the user-oriented smart grid. So there are 2 different back-end implementations. I cannot mention them now. But there are 2 possible scenarios that utilities can implement peer-to-peer energy sharing. Stay tuned and you will see a lot of things in the future. Sorry for that, but we are a startup company.
I had a question I was going to pose to the mayors this morning, but they ran out of time before I got to the mic. So I think this question is relevant here. We've got a Texas state emerging technology fund, which, the idea of an emerging technology fund funded by a government is in essence, it's a good idea. There may be some issues, some political questions about how well it's functioning at the state level. But the question is, what about taking the idea of an emerging technology fund funded, let's say, by a group of local governments, like namely, again, I was going to ask the 4 mayors who were here this morning, have you guys given any thought to actually creating a fund to encourage the startup of companies in this region, with the understanding, of course, that you spend the money here and you stay here, you create jobs here, and maybe specifically some of that fund would be used to patent inventions that folks here in Central Texas have ideas for. So we're talking about very early startup, but essentially, again, taking the idea of an emerging technology fund that is for the benefit of a region of the state to encourage the development of companies such as your companies. And this is a question for any or all of you.
Yeah, I'll start off. I think, so I am one that is that has been very much in favor of the Texas Emerging Technology Fund, as painful as it is to go through, and the process that they've put us through, and the rules that change on a weekly basis. It's worth it because it is money. Now, some people would say the government shouldn't be putting money into startups and playing favorites and things like that. In my estimation, and I've got a whole opinion on how it should be structured, but I think that instead of giving $3 million and $5 million, you know, these companies, when they're early stage, they need $250,000, $500,000. Early stage, seed stage, you can spread it across lots and lots and lots of different companies, so you take the risk out of some of that. From a city perspective, Mark, I actually think it's a really good idea as well. You know, we as a city give incentives for Apple to move here and those types of things, and we won't get into the benefit or not of that, but that same money could be used on a city basis, and there are requirements in the Texas ATF that these companies have to be here in Texas. They have to employ so many people. They have to, if they're a manufacturer here in Texas, that type of thing. So there are criteria around that. You could do it in the city as well. What do you guys think?
Yeah, the idea of the whole crowdsourcing world is being turned upside down right now, and the SEC still hasn't come out officially with all of it, but something's got to be done differently because there are so many ideas. I mean, I love the fact that so many things we talk about were started in garages or nights and weekends. I mean, $5,000 was my first check. So I don't know what the X return would be on $5,000, but it was big. But we just need that operating capital.
Yeah. The early money, the $5,000, the $25,000. You know, Austin Energy is a partner of ours. It is a city program. We actually, with the Austin Technology Incubator, they offer 2 grants. They're $25,000 grants for ATI companies that are applicable to what Austin Energy is doing. This gentleman here, it was part of his original $25,000 that they got. It means a lot. I mean, it actually means a paycheck for somebody. It means, you know, maybe paying rent or whatever it might be. You know, you know, if you start a company and you've got lots of money, then you don't have to worry about this. But most entrepreneurs who start companies are not independently wealthy. So it is a situation where you've got to go out and get external funds. And there's lots of ways to do it. I mean, I got to be honest with you. When he first told me he was going to go public as a 15-man company, I was like, what are you talking about? And he explained how he was going to do this. That was not a connection that I made for him. It was something else that he did. And boy, has it worked well. And it really changed my mind about how to go public for an early stage company. So there's lots of ways to do it.
I guess I'd like to talk just a second about this too. I think one of the things as an entrepreneur, you don't know where you're going to get your money from. You try it all. You guys would all agree, right? You don't know where your money's coming, you try it all. And
lemonade stand.
What?
Lemonade stand.
Lemonade stand.
Yeah, lemonade stand. So you try it all, and you sort of figure out what works for you, what works for the business model. We had the option to do something which was a little bit out of the box. We jumped through that hoop, and that was extraordinary. But getting back to the question, I think the point I would like to stress with you is I think the few $100,000 to $1 million is sort of the right price range for seed money for a variety of reasons. One is it's not a big enough pot of gold that a lot of politics and lobbying gets involved, and that helps keep it simpler in a lot of respects. Yep. And that early money is so extremely valuable. The $1 million we got from the state was huge for us. So yeah, I agree with your point there.
Okay, I guess we're done. Thank you very much, guys.